Welcome to NSG 411 Study Session 2, Management Theories and Applications. Action. In this study session, we will examine the various theories of management and their applications. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to explain the following management theories: classical management theory, human relations theory, neo-human relations theory, system theories, and contingency theory. 2.1 Classical management theory. Here, we focus on three well-known early writers on management: HENRI, FAYOL, F.W. Taylor, Max Weber. Definition of management. Management takes place within a structured organizational setting with prescribed roles. It is directed towards the achievement of aims and objectives through influencing the efforts of others. Classical management theory. Emphasis on structure. Descriptive about what is good for the firm. Practical manager. Except Weber, sociologist. HENRI, FAYOL, 1841 to 1925, France. 1. Division of work. Reduces the span of attention or effort for any one person or group. Develops practice and familiarity. 2. Authority. The right to give an order should not be considered without reference to responsibility. 3. Discipline. Outward marks of respect in accordance with formal or informal agreements between firm and its employees. 4. Unity of command. One man superior. 5. Unity of direction. One head and one plan for a group of activities with the same objective. 6. Subordination of individual interest to the general interest. The interest of one individual or one group should not prevail over the general good. This is a difficult area of management. 7. Remuneration. Pay should be fair to both the employee and the firm. 8. Centralization is always present to a greater or less extent, depending on the size of the company and quality of its managers. 9. Scalar chain. The line of authority from top to bottom of the organization. 10. Order. A place for everything and everything in its place. The right man in the right place. 11. Equity. A combination of kindliness and justice towards the employees. 12. Stability of tenure of personnel. Employees need to be given time to settle into their jobs, even though this may be a lengthy period in the case of the managers. 13. Initiative. Within the limits of authority and discipline, all levels of staff should be encouraged to show initiative. 14. Esprit de corps. Harmony is a great strength to an organization. Teamwork should be encouraged. Advantages. 1. FAYOL was the first person to actually give a definition of management which is generally familiar today, namely forecast and plan, to organize, to command, to coordinate, and to control. FAYOL also gave much of the basic terminology and concepts which will be elaborated upon by future researchers, such as division of labor, scalar chain, unity of command, and centralization. Disadvantages. FAYOL was describing the structure of formal organizations, absence of attention to issues such as individual versus general interest, remuneration, and equity suggest that FAYOL saw the employer as paternalistic and by defining working in the employee's interest. FAYOL does mention the issues relating to the sensitivity of a patient's needs, such as initiative and esprit de corps. It saw them as issues in the context of rational organizational structure and not in terms of adapting structures and changing people's behavior to achieve the best fit between the organization and its customers. Many of these principles have been absorbed into modern-day organizations, but they were not designed to cope with conditions of rapid change and issues of employee participation in the decision-making process of organizations such as are current today in the early 21st century. F.W. Taylor, 1856 to 1915, USA, the Scientific Management School. Taylorism involved breaking down the components of manual tasks in manufacturing environments, timing each movement, time and motion studies, so that there could be a proven best way to perform each task. Thus, employees could be trained to be first class within their job. This type of management was particularly relevant to performance drives, e.g., action on projects. This was a rigid system where every task became discrete and specialized. It is fair to suggest that this is unlikely to be of value to the NHS, with the modernization agenda suggesting that we should have a flexible workforce. Key point about Taylor, who is credited with what we now call Taylorism. He was in the Scientific Management School. His emphasis were on efficiency and productivity, but he ignored many of the human aspects of employment. For the managers, scientific management required them to develop a science for each operation to replace opinion and rule of thumb, determine accurately from the science the correct time and methods for each job, time and motion studies, set up a suitable organization to take all responsibility from the workers except that of the actual job performance. Select and train the workers in the manner described above. Accept that management itself be governed by the science deployed for each operation and surrender its arbitrary powers over the workers, that is, cooperate with them. For the workers, scientific management required them to stop worrying about the divisions of the fruits of production between wages and profit. Ensure that there is prosperity of the firm by working in the correct way and receiving wage increases. Give up their idea of time wasting and cooperate with the management in developing the science. Accept that management should be responsible for determining what was done and how. Agree to be trained in new methods where applicable. The benefits, mainly for the management, arising from scientific management can be summarized as follows. Its rational approach to the organizational work enables tasks and procedures to be measured with a considerable degree of accuracy. Measurement of paths and processes provide useful information on which to base improvements in working methods, plant design, etc. Improving work methods brought enormous increases in productivity. It enabled employees to be paid by results and to take advantage of incentive payments. It stimulated management into adopting a more positive role in leadership at shop floor level. It contributed to major improvements in physical working conditions for employees. It provided the formation for modern work studies. The drawbacks were mainly for the workers. It reduced the worker's role to that of a rigid adherence to methods and procedures over which he or she had no discretion. It led to increased fragmentation of work due to its emphasis on divisional labor. It generated an economically based approach to the motivation of employees by linking pay to geared outputs. It put the planning and control of workplace activities exclusively in the hands of the managers. It ruled out any realistic bargaining about wage rates, since every job was measured and rated scientifically. Therefore, in summary, while the scientific management technique has been employed to increase productivity and efficiency both in private and public services, it has also had the disadvantages of ignoring many of the human aspects of employment. This led to the creation of boring repetitive jobs with the introduction of systems for tight control and the alienation of shop floor employees from their managers. Taylorism prevailed in the 30s through to the early 60s, and in many organizations considerably later than this. Take two. And in many organizations considerably later than this. Peters and Waterman in the 70s and 80s, and Senge late 80s and early 90s, led us towards what we now call systems thinking, where the rights and potential wider contributions of employees received considerably greater emphasis. Max Weber, 1864 to 1924, Germany. Bureaucracy, in this context, is the organizational form of certain dominant characteristics such as a hierarchy of authority and a system of rules. Bureaucracy, in a sense of red tape or officialdom, should not be used as these meanings are value-reading and only emphasize very negative aspects of the original Max Weber model. Through analysis of organizations, Weber identified three basic types of legitimate authority: traditional, charismatic, and rational legal. Authority has to be distinguished from power in this discussion. Power is a unilateral thing. It enables a person to force another to behave in a certain way, whether by means of strength or by rewards. Authority, on the other hand, implies acceptance of the rules by those over whom it is to be exercised within limits agreeable to the subordinate that Weber refers to in discussing legitimate authority. Weber presented three types of legitimate authority: traditional authority, where acceptance of those in authority arose from tradition and custom; charismatic authority, where acceptance arises from loyalty to and confidence in the personal qualities of the ruler; rational legal authority, where acceptance arises out of the office or position of the person in authority as bounded by the rules and procedures of the organization. It is the rational legal authority form that exists in most organizations today, and this is the form to which Weber ascribed the term bureaucracy. The main features of bureaucracy, according to Weber, were a continuous organization of functions bounded by rules, that individuals functioned within the limits of the specialization of the work, the degree of authority allocated, and the rules governing the exercise of authority; a hierarchical structure of offices; appointment to offices made on the grounds of technical competence only; the separation of officials from the ownership of the organization. The authority was vested in the official positions and not in the personalities that held this post. Rules, decisions, and actions were formulated and recorded in writing. It is not coincidence that Weber's writings were at a time of the major industrial revolutions and the growth of large complex organizations out of the cottage industries and/or entrepreneurial businesses. The efficiency of this rational and logistical organization shares a considerable amount of common ground with the thinking of FAYOL. In particular, features such as scalar chain, specialization, authority, and the definition of jobs, which were so essential to successful management as described by FAYOL, are typical of bureaucracy. There is also little doubt that Weber's ideas concerning specific spheres of competence and employment based on technical competence would have considerable appeal for tailored scientific managers. Advantages: appointment, promotion, and authority were dependent on technical competence and reinforced by written rules and procedures of promoting those most able to manage rather than those favored to manage. Anything else is regarded as nepotism and corruption. The adoption of management systems allow organizations to grow into large complex organized systems that are focused towards formalized explicit goals. It cannot be stated strongly enough that the Weber theory has the advantage of being used as a gold standard on which to compare and develop other modern theories. Disadvantages: subsequent analysis by other researchers have identified many disadvantages. 1. Tendency for organizations to become procedure-dominated rather than goal-dominated. 2. Tendency for heavily formalized organizational roles to suppress initiative and flexibility of the job holders. 3. Rigid behavior by senior managers can lead to standardized services that do not meet the needs of the client. 4. Rigid procedures and rules are demotivating for the subordinates that work in the organizations. 5. Exercise of control based on knowledge, as advocated by Weber, has led to the growth of experts whose opinions and attitudes may frequently clash with those of the more generalized managers and supervisors. Human relations theory. ELTON MAYO, HAWTHORNE studies, where classical theorists were concerned with structure and mechanics of organizations. The theorists of human relations were understandably concerned with the human factors. At the center of this foci are assumptions about relationship between employer and employee, best summarized by Skene, 1965, or ELTON MAYO. They were academic social scientists. Their emphasis was on human behavior within organizations. They stated that people's needs are decisive factors in achieving an organization's effectiveness. They were to be predictive of behavior in organizations. A motive equals to a need or driving force within a person. The process of motivation involves choosing between alternative forms of action in order to achieve some desired end or goal. Alternative forms of action of motivation depend on a manager's assumptions about his or her subordinates. 1. Rational economic man. Prime motivators: self-interest and maximization of gain. Theory: basis of classical, especially Taylor and scientific theory. 2. Social man. Prime motivators: social need, being part of a group. Theory: basis of MAYO. 3. Self-actualizing man. Self-fulfillment of individual. MASLOW, LIKERT, MCGREGOR, HERZBEG theory. 4. Complex man. Depends on individual, group or task. Systems approach. ELTON MAYO, HAWTHORNE studies. The groundbreaking HAWTHORNE Studies carried out in the HAWTHORNE plant of the Western Electric Company, USA, 1927 to 1932. Stage 1, 1924 to 1927. Study of the physical surroundings, lighting level, on productivity of workers. Control group and experimental group previously had similar productivity before study began. Control group equals to constant lighting level. Experimental group equals to varied lighting level. Results: both groups' productivity increased even when experimental group was working in dim light. Product leader called MAYO and colleagues to explain. Stage 2, 1927 to 1929. Relay assembly room stage. Still analyzing effects of physical surroundings, rest, pauses, lunch break duration, length of working week on output. Results: output increased even when worsening conditions. Hypothesis was now that it was the attitudes of subjects at work and not the physical conditions. This gave rise to the HAWTHORNE effect. Employees were responding not so much to changes in the environment as to the fact that they were the center of attention, a special group. Stage 3, 1928 to 1930. A total of 20,000 interviews were collected with the workers on employee attitudes to working conditions, their supervision, and their jobs. Stage 4, 1932. Bank winning observation room. This time, the new subjects, 14 men, put in separate room for 6 months. Result: productivity restricted due to pressure from peers to adopt a slower rate, to circumvent company wages incentive scheme, to generally adopt own group rules and behavior. Advantages: the first real attempt to undertake genuine social research in industrial setting. Individuals cannot be treated in isolation but function with group members. That individual motivation did not primarily lie in monetary or physical condition, but in need and status in a group. The strength of informal as opposed to formal groups demonstrated a behavior of workers. Formal supervisors were powerless in stage 4. It highlighted need for supervisors to be sensitive and cater for social needs of workers within the group. Disadvantages: from 1930s to 1950s, some doubt was cast on the increased applicability of these theories to everyday working life. Neo-human relations theory. These groups were social psychologists who developed more complex theories. Maslow, MCGREGOR, Theory X and Theory Y, LIKERT, and juries. Maslow is still often quoted today, having developed a seminal theory of the needs of human beings. HERZBERG and MCGREGOR's neo-human relations theory both focus on motivation and leadership, but their theories are, as we shall see, very different. In this group, we find a particular focus on human motivation, including satisfaction, incentive, intrinsic. Maslow, 1943. 1. This psychologist, from his studies, proposed a hierarchy of human needs, building from basic needs at the base to higher needs at the top. Self-administration, self-esteem, love, food, shelter, safety, and physiological needs. 2. Maslow made assumptions that people need to satisfy each level of need before elevating their needs to the next higher level. E.g., a hungry person's need is dominated by a need to eat. that is, survival, but not to be loved until he or she is no longer hungry. 3. Today, the focus in most Western societies is on the elements towards the top of Maslow's hierarchy, in which work environment and jobs, including having a job and the satisfaction or otherwise such jobs provide, have become typical features. Notably, the attainment of self-esteem and, at the very top of the hierarchy, what Maslow calls self-actualization, fundamentally the synthesis of worth, contribution, and perceived value of the individual in society. Advantages. Managers can or should consider the needs and aspirations of individual subordinates. Disadvantages. The broad assumptions in 2 above have been disproved by exemptions, e.g., hungry, ill artists working in a garret. 2. Empirical research over the years has not tended to support this theoretical model. 3. Regarding monetary reward, sometimes beyond certain level of pay, e.g. consultants, other things become more important than another 1,000 euro a year, e.g. working conditions, boss, environment, etc. MCGREGOR, Theory X and Theory Y. Managers were perceived by MCGREGOR, whose theories are still often quoted, to make 2 noticeably different sets of assumptions about their employees. Theory X, essentially scientific management, lazy, avoid responsibility, therefore need control or coercion. Scaling type, rational, economic man. Theory Y, like working, accept and seek responsibility, need space to develop imagination or ingenuity. Scaling type, self-actualizing man. Advantages. Identifies 2 main types of individual for managers to consider and how to motivate. Disadvantages. Only present 2 extremes of managerial behavior. 200 engineers and accountants were asked to recall the times, occasions when they experienced satisfactory and unsatisfactory feeling about their jobs. Later, this also involves manual and clerical staff. Similar results claimed. HERZBERG showed 2 categories of findings: motivators, factors giving rise to satisfaction; hygiene factors, factors giving rise to dissatisfaction. Important motivators: achievement, recognition, work itself, responsibility, advancement. Important hygienes: company policy and recognition, supervision, the technical aspects, salary, interpersonal relations, supervisions, working conditions. Other features include motivators related to content of work, promote satisfaction. Only neo-human school attempts to address this. Hygiene factors related to context or environment of work, only prevent dissatisfaction. Taylor, salary, plus MAYO, interpersonal relations, look at this. Advantages. HERZBERG's work led to a practical way to improve motivation, which had, up to that point, been dominated by Taylorism, salary, wages. In particular, job enrichment programs mushroomed. The aim of this was to design work and work structures to contain the optimum number of motivators. This approach counters the years of Taylorism, which sought to break down work into its simplest components and to remove responsibility from individuals for planning and control. Disadvantages. There remain doubts about HERZBERG's factors' applicability to non-professional groups, despite the fact that some of its latter studies involved the clerical and manual groups. The numbers were in these categories, though, were small, and many researchers still argue about the results in these groups. Social scientists argue about the validity of its definition of job satisfaction. LIKERT, it described new patterns of management based on the behaviors of managers. 4 main patterns. 1. Exploitative. Authoritative, where power and direction come from the top downwards, where threats and punishment are employed, where communication is poor and teamwork non-existent. Productivity is typically mediocre. Rational economic man. 2. Benevolent. Authoritative is similar to the above, but allows some upward opportunities for consultation and some delegation. Rewards may be available as well as threats. Productivity is typically fair to good, but at cost of considerable absenteeism and turnover. Weaker version of rational economic man. 3. Consultative, where goals are set or orders issued after discussion with subordinates, where communication is upwards and downwards, and when teamwork is encouraged, at least partially. Some involvement of employees as a motivator. Social man. 4. Participative. Group is reckoned by many to be the ideal system. Under this system, the keynote is participation, leading to commitment to the organization goals in a fully cooperative way. Communication is both upwards, downwards, and lateral. Motivation is obtained by a variety of means. Productivity is excellent, and absenteeism and turnover are low. Self-actualizing man. We also see MCGREGOR theory wide. Another useful way of looking at this is that 1 is a highly task-oriented management style, whereas 4 is a highly people-oriented management style. Advantages. Essentially, LIKERT work gives more alternatives in the spectrum between theory X and theory Y of MCGREGOR. Disadvantage. Criticized for being based more on theory than empirical practice, therefore not widely accepted by practicing managers. Juries. He studied the needs of people and the needs of organization. He felt that classical models of organization promoted immaturity. He felt that it was important to understand the needs of people and integrate them with needs of organization. Only in this way, he said, can employees become cooperative rather than defensive or aggressive. Characteristics of employee. Immaturity versus maturity. Passivity. Activity. Dependence. Relative independence. Behave in a few ways. Behave in many ways. Erratic, shallow interest. Deeper interest. Short-term perspective. Long-term perspective. Subordinate position. Equal or superior position. Lack of awareness of self. Awareness and self-control. Advantages. Juries is moving here towards a contingency approach, that is, remedy depends on diagnosing problems first. It presents a spectrum rather than bipolar patterns of employees' behavior, rather than bipolar. Patterns of employees' behavior could be expected from immaturity to maturity. Certain behaviors of employees may be preferred. Disadvantages. Still too centered around self-actualizing man, viewed not to be applicable to production lines with manual workers, workers in sterile supplies, people manning phone helplines, etc., whose needs are perceived to be typically lower in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. System theories. Attention began to focus on organizations as systems with a number of interrelated subsystems. The systems approach attempted to synthesize the classical approaches, organizations without people, with the latter human relations approaches that focus on the psychological and social aspects, emphasize human needs, almost people without organizations. Systems theory focuses on complexity and interdependence of relationships. A system is composed of regularly interacting or interdependent groups of activities or parts that form the emergent whole. Part of systems theory, system dynamics, is a method for understanding the dynamic behavior of complex systems. The basis of the method is the recognition that the structure of any system, the many circular, interlocking, sometimes time-delayed relationships among its components, is often just as important in determining its behavior as the individual components themselves. Early systems theorists aimed at finding a general systems theory that could explain all systems in all fields of science. They help us understand the interactions between individuals, groups, organizations, communities, larger social systems, and their environment, and help us enhance our understanding of how human behavior operates in a context. A system is a part and it is a whole at the same time. System theory key terms: boundary, an imaginary line around system of focus. It regulates flow of energy, e.g., information, resources, into and out of the system. Focal system, the system on which you are concentrating at any given time, e.g., a manufacturing plant or a family. Subsystem, a part of the focal system, e.g., in a family, it may be children or parents, sometimes referred to as sibling subsystem and parental subsystem. Suprasystem is external to focal system. It is its environment. It may include place of employment, school, neighborhood, church, social service system. Open system. Relatively open systems have a freer exchange of information and resources within the system and also allow relatively free passage of energy from and to the outside of the system. Closed system is more self-contained and isolated from their environment. The business organization is an open system. There is continual interaction with the broader external environment of which it forms a part. The systems approach considers the organization within its total environment and emphasizes the importance of multiple channels of interaction. Thus, the systems approach views organizations as a whole and involves the study of the organization in terms of the relationship between technical and social variables with the systems. Thus, changes in one part, technical or social, will affect other parts and therefore the whole system. It was Treese and others at the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations who focused on socio-technical systems arising from their study of the effects of changing technology in the coal mining industries in the 1940s. The following timeline gives an interesting perspective to the development of systems theory. 1950, General Systems Theory, founded by Ludwig von Bertalanffy. 1960, Cybernetics, W. Ross Ashby. Norbert Wiener. Mathematical theory of the communication and control of systems through regulatory feedback, closely related. Control theory. 1970 catastrophe theory. René Thom, Isizman, branch of mathematics that deals with bifurcations in dynamical systems, classifies phenomena characterized by sudden shifts in behavior arising from small changes in circumstances. 1980 chaos theory. David Ruelle, Edward Lorenz, Michel Feigenbaum, Steve Small, James A. York. Mathematical theory of nonlinear dynamical systems that describes bifurcations, strange attractors, and chaotic motions. 1990 complex adaptive systems. CAS. John H. Holland, Murray Gell-Mann, Harold Morowitz, W. Brian Author. The new science of complexity, which describes emergence, adaptation, and self-organization, all of which are basic system principles, was established mainly by researchers of the Santa Fe Institute, SFI. It is based on agents and computer simulations and includes multi-agent systems, MAS, which have become an important tool to study social and complex systems. CAS are still an active field of research. Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. Organization is an open system with environment. Organizations are complex systems of people, tasks, technology. Technological environmental factors are just as important as socio-psychological. Contingency theories. From the late 1950s, a new approach to organization theory was developed, which became known as contingency theory. This theory argues that there is no one best way to structure an organization. An organization will face a range of choices when determining how it should be structured, how it should be organized, how it should be managed. Successful organizations adopt structures that are an appropriate response to a number of variables or contingencies, which influence both the needs of the organization and how it works. These theories take a comprehensive view of people in organizations. They recommend a diagnosis of people, tasks, technology, environment, then suggest the development of appropriate solutions. 1. Ford, UK. 2. Burns and Stoker, UK. 3. Lawrence Lush, USA. Contingency theories have found that 3 contingencies are particularly important in influencing an organization's structure. These are its size, the technology it uses, its operating environment. There are 2 significant implications of contingency theory. If there is no one best way, then even apparently quite similar organizations, for example, 2 nearby colleges, may choose significantly different structures and still survive, be reasonably successful in achieving their missions, and so on. If different parts of the same organization are influenced in different ways by the contingencies bearing upon them, then it may be appropriate for them to be structured differently. For example, one university department may have a functional structure, whilst another may have a matrix structure. Not many managers use a singular theory or concept when implementing strategies in the workplace. They commonly use a combination of a number of theories depending on the workplace, purpose, and workforce. Contingency theory, chaos theory, and system theory are popular management theories. Theory X and Y, which addresses management strategies for workforce motivation, is also implemented to help increase worker productivity. Contingency theory. This theory asserts that managers make decisions based on the situation at hand rather than a one-size-fits-all method. A manager takes appropriate action based on aspects most important to the current situation. Managers in a university may want to utilize a leadership approach that includes participation from workers, while a leader in the army may want to use an autocratic approach. Systems theory. Managers who understand systems theory recognize how different systems affect a worker and how a worker affects the systems around them. A system is made up of a variety of parts that work together to achieve a goal. Systems theory is a broad perspective that allows managers to examine patterns and events in the workplace. This helps managers to coordinate programs to work as a collective whole for the overall goal or mission of the organization rather than for isolated departments. Chaos theory. Change is constant. Although certain events and circumstances in an organization can be controlled, others can't. Chaos theory recognizes that change is inevitable and is rarely controlled. While organizations grow, complexity and the possibility for susceptible events increase. Organizations increase energy to maintain the new level of complexity, and as organizations spend more energy, more structure is needed for stability. The system continues to evolve and change. Theory X and Theory Y. The management theory an individual chooses to utilize is strongly influenced by beliefs about worker attitudes. Managers who believe workers naturally lack ambition and need incentives to increase productivity lean toward the Theory X management style. Theory Y believes that workers are naturally driven and take responsibility, while managers who believe in Theory X values often use an authoritarian style of leadership. Theory Y leaders encourage participation from workers. Frederick Taylor, Scientific Management. Description. Frederick Taylor, with his theories of scientific management, started the era of modern management. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Frederick Taylor was decrying the awkward, inefficient, or ill-directed movements of men as a national loss. He advocated a change from the old system of personal management to a new system of scientific management. Under personal management, a captain of industry was expected to be personally brilliant. Taylor claimed that a group of ordinary men following a scientific method would outperform the older personally brilliant captains of industry. Taylor consistently sought to overthrow management by rule of thumb and replace it with actual timed observations, leading to the one best practice. Following this philosophy, he also advocated the systematic training of workers in the one best practice rather than allowing them personal discretion in their tasks. He believed that a spirit of healthy cooperation would develop between workers and management, and that cooperation would ensure that the workers would follow the one best practice. Under these philosophies, Taylor further believed that the workload would be evenly shared between the workers and management, with management performing the science and instruction, and the workers performing the labor, each group doing the work for which it was best suited. Taylor's strongest positive legacy was the concept of breaking a complex task down into a number of small subtasks and optimizing the performance of the subtasks. This positive legacy leads to the stopwatch measured time trials, which in turn lead to Taylor's strongest negative legacy. Many critics, both historical and contemporary, have pointed out that Taylor's theories tend to dehumanize the workers. To modern readers, he stands convicted by his own words. In almost all of the mechanic arts, the science which underlies each act of each workman is so great and amounts to so much that the workman who is best suited to actually doing the work is incapable of fully understanding this science without the guidance and help of those who are working with him or over him, either through lack of education or through insufficient mental capacity. To work according to scientific laws, the management must take over and perform much of the work which is now left to the men. Almost every act of the workman should be preceded by one or more preparatory acts of the management which enable him to do his work better and quicker than he otherwise could. The principles of scientific management. Environment. Taylor's work was strongly influenced by a social or historical period. His lifetime, 1856 to 1915, was during the Industrial Revolution. The overall industrial environment of this period is well documented by the Dickens classic Hard Times or Schindler's The Jungle. Autocratic management was the norm. The manufacturing community had the idea of interchangeable parts for almost a century. The sciences of physics and chemistry were bringing forth new miracles on a monthly basis. One can see Taylor turning to science as a solution to the inefficiencies and injustice of the period. His idea of breaking a complex task into a sequence of simple subtasks closely mirrors the interchangeable parts ideas pioneered by Eli Whitney earlier in the century. Furthermore, the concept of training the workers and developing a healthy corporation represented a significant improvement over the feudal-human relations of the time. Successes. Scientific management met with significant success. Taylor's personal work included papers on the science of cutting metal, coal shovel design, worker incentive schemes, and a piece rate system for shop management. Scientific management organizational influences can be seen in the development on the fields of industrial engineering, personnel, and quality control. Frederick Taylor and scientific management. Frederick Winlow Taylor, 1856 to 1915, was an American inventor and engineer that applied his engineering and scientific knowledge to management and developed a theory called scientific management theory. His two most important books on his theory are Shop Management, 1903, and The Principles of Scientific Management, 1911. Frederick Taylor's scientific management theory can be seen in nearly all modern manufacturing firms and many other types of businesses. Its imprints can be found in production planning, production control, process design, quality control, cost accounting, and even ergonomics. If you understand the principles of scientific management, you will be able to understand how manufacturers produce their goods and manage their employees. You will also understand the importance of quantitative analysis, or the analysis of data and numbers to improve production effectiveness and efficiency. Principles of scientific management theory. In broad terms, scientific management theory is the application of industrial engineering principles to create a system where waste is avoided, the process and method of production is improved, and goods are fairly distributed. These improvements serve the interests of employers, employees, and society in general. Taylor's theory can be broken down into 4 general principles for management: actively gathering, analyzing, and converting information to laws, rules, or even mathematical formulas for completing tasks; utilizing a scientific approach in the selection and training of workers; bringing together the science and the worker so that the workers apply the scientifically developed techniques for the task; applying the work equally between workers and managers, where management applies scientific techniques to planning and the workers perform the tasks pursuant to the plans. Frederick Taylor approached the study of management quantitatively through the collection and analysis of data. For example, he and his followers performed motion studies to improve efficiency. He analyzed the motions required to complete a task, devised a way to break the task down into component motions, and found the most efficient and effective manner to do the work. An example of a motion study is observing the number of distinct motions required to shovel coal into a furnace. The task is then broken down into its distinct components, such as picking up the shovel, walking to the coal, bending over, manipulating the shovel to scoop the coal, bending back up, walking to the furnace, and manipulating the shovel to deposit the coal. The most efficient way to perform this task was developed, and workers were instructed on how to apply the method. Human Relations Movement. Hawthorne Works Experiment. Description: if Taylor believed that science dictated that the highest productivity was found in the one best way, and that way could be obtained by controlled experiment, ELTON MAYO's experiences in the Hawthorne Works experiment disproved those beliefs to the same extent that Michelson's experiment in 1926 disproved the existence of either. The Hawthorne study started in the early 1920s as an attempt to determine the effects of lighting on worker productivity. When those experiments showed no clear correlation between light level and productivity, the experiments then started looking at other factors. Working with a group of women, the experimenters made a number of changes: rest breaks, no rest breaks, free meals, no free meals, more hours in the workday or work week, fewer hours in the workday or work week. Their productivity went up at each change. Finally, the women were put back to their original hours and conditions, and they set a productivity record. This strongly disproved Taylor's beliefs in 3 ways. First, the experimenters determined that the women had become a team and that the social dynamics of the team were a stronger force on productivity than doing things the one best way. Second, the women would vary their work methods to avoid boredom without harming overall productivity. Finally, the group was not strongly supervised by management, but instead had a great deal of freedom. These results made it clear that the group dynamics and social makeup of an organization were an extremely important force, either for or against higher productivity. This caused the call for greater participation for the workers, greater trust and openness in the working environment, and a greater attention to teams and groups in the workplace. Environment. The human relations movement that stemmed from Mayo's Hawthorne Works experiment was born in a time of significant change. The Newtonian science that supported the one best way of doing things was being strongly challenged by the new physics results of Michelson, Rutherford, and Einstein. Suddenly, even in the realm of earth science, uncertainty and variation had found a place. In the workplace, there were strong pressures for shorter hours and employee stock ownership. As the effect of the 1929 stock market crash, and following depression were felt, employee unions started to form. Successes. While Taylor's impacts were the establishment of the Industrial Engineering, Quality Control and Personnel Departments, the Human Relations Movement's greatest impact came in what the organization's leadership and personnel department were doing. The seemingly new concepts of group dynamics, teamwork, and organizational social systems all stem from Mayo's work in the mid-1920s. Max Weber, bureaucracy. Description. At roughly the same time, Max Weber was attempting to do for sociology what Taylor had done for industrial operations. Weber postulated that Western civilization was shifting from rational or value-oriented thinking, affective action, action derived from emotions, and traditional action, action derived from past precedent, to educational or technocratic thinking. He believed that civilization was changing to seek technically optimal results at the expense of emotional or humanistic content. Viewing the growth of large-scale organizations of all types during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Weber developed a set of principles for an ideal bureaucracy. These principles included fixed and official jurisdictional areas, a firmly ordered hierarchy of super and subordination, management based on written records, thorough and expert training, official activity taking priority over other activities, and that management of a given organization follows stable, knowable rules. The bureaucracy was envisioned as a large machine for attaining its goals in the most efficient manner possible. Weber did not advocate bureaucracy. Indeed, his writings show a strong caution for its excesses. The more fully realized, the more bureaucracy depersonalizes itself. That is, the more completely it succeeds in achieving the exclusion of love, hatred, and every purely personal, especially irrational and inculcable feeling from the execution of official tasks, or by it, the performance of each individual worker is mathematically measured. Each man becomes a little cog in the machine, and aware of this, his one preoccupation is whether he can become a bigger cog. Environment. Weber, as an economist and social historian, saw his environment transitioning from older emotion and tradition-driven values to technological ones. It is unclear if he saw the tremendous growth in government, military, and industry size and complexity as a result of the efficiencies of bureaucracy, or their growth driving those organizations to bureaucracy. Successes. While Weber was fundamentally an observer rather than a designer, it is clear that his predictions have come true. His principles of an ideal bureaucracy still ring true today, and many of the evils of today's bureaucracies come from their deviating from those ideal principles. Unfortunately, Weber was also successful in predicting that bureaucracies would have extreme difficulties dealing with individual cases. It would have been fascinating to see how Weber would have integrated Mayo's results into his theories. It is probable that he would have seen the group dynamics as noise in the system, limiting the bureaucracy's potential for both efficiency and inhumanity. HENRI FAYOL administration. Description. With two exemptions, HENRI FAYOL's theories of administration dovetail nicely into the bureaucratic superstructure described by Weber. HENRI FAYOL focuses on the personal duties of management at a much more granular level than Weber did. While Weber laid out principles for an ideal bureaucratic organization, FAYOL's work is more directed at the management layer. FAYOL believed that management had 5 principal roles: to forecast and plan, to organize, to command, to coordinate, and to control. Forecasting and planning was the act of anticipating the future and acting accordingly. Organization was the development of the institution's resources, both material and human. Commanding was keeping the institution's actions and processes running. Coordination was the alignment and harmonization of the group's efforts. Finally, control meant that the above activities were performed in accordance with appropriate rules and procedures. FAYOL developed 14 principles of administration to go along with management's 5 primary roles. These principles are enumerated below. Division of work. When employees are specialized, output can increase because they become increasingly skilled and efficient. Authority. Managers must have the authority to give orders, but they must also keep in mind that with authority comes responsibility. Discipline. Discipline must be upheld in organizations, but methods for doing so can vary. Unity of command. Employees should have only one direct supervisor. Unity of direction. Teams with the same objective should be working under the direction of one manager, using one plan. This will ensure that action is properly coordinated. Subordination of individual interest to the general interest. The interests of one employee should not be allowed to become more important than those of the group. This includes managers. Remuneration. Employee satisfaction depends on fair remuneration for everyone. This includes financial and non-financial compensation. Centralization. This principle refers to how close employees are to the decision-making process. It is important to aim for an appropriate balance. Scalar chain. Employees should be aware of where they stand in the organization's hierarchy or chain of command. Order. The workplace facilities must be clean, tidy, and safe for employees. Everything should have its place. Equity. Managers should be fair to staff at all times, both maintaining discipline as necessary and acting with kindness where appropriate. Stability of tenure of personnel. Managers should strive to minimize employee turnover. Personnel planning should be a priority. Initiative. Employees should be given the necessary level of freedom to create and carry out plans. Esprit de corps. Organizations should strive to promote team spirit and unity. The final 2 principles, initiative and esprit de corps, show a difference between FAYOL's concept of an ideal organization and Weber's. Weber's predicted a completely impersonal organization with little human-level interaction between its members. FAYOL clearly believed personal effort and team dynamics were part of an ideal organization. Environment. FAYOL was a successful mining engineer and senior executive prior to publishing his Principles of Administrative Science. It is not clear from the literature reviewed if FAYOL's work was precipitated or influenced by Taylor's. From the timing, 1911 publication of Taylor's The Principles of Scientific Management, to FAYOL's work in 1916, it is possible. FAYOL was not primarily a theorist, but rather a successful senior manager who sought to bring order to his personal experiences. Successes. FAYOL's 5 principal roles of management are still actively practiced today. The author has found, plan, organize, command, coordinate and control, written on more than one manager's whiteboard during his career. The concept of giving appropriate authority with responsibility is also widely commented on, if not well practiced. Unfortunately, its principles of unity of command and unity of direction are consistently violated in matrix management, the structure of choice for many of today's complaints. Conclusion: it is clear that modern organizations are strongly influenced by the theories of Taylor, MAYO, Weber, and FAYOL. Their precepts have become such a strong part of modern management that it is difficult to believe that these concepts were original and new at some point in history. The modern idea that these concepts are common sense is strong tribute to these founders. FAYOL 6 functions of management. FAYOL 6 primary functions of management, which go hand in hand with the principles, are as follows: forecasting, planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, controlling. Study session summary. In this study session, we examine the various theories of management and their applications. We highlighted these theories to include contingency theory, system theory, classical management theories, human relations and neo-human relations theories. End of study session 2.